So, Chad, I just was so appreciative that we were able to get an early look at your book, and I just love the way that you bring to life the economic realities of first century Rome and Palestine. Um, the world of the crowd that Jesus is preaching to, the world of the fishermen, in this Luke 5 scripture for week 4 of this series. You call this the first of Luke's demonstration projects concerning food justice, and how this points to the political, economic, and social character of the great economy and the project of Jubilee. Can you expound on that a bit for our listeners, as they anticipate reading the details of it when your book comes out? Friends, I just want to keep encouraging you. If you haven't already been convinced that you need this book, you need this book.
Yep.
And what you're going to hear here is just the tip of the iceberg. So, but Ched, take us a little bit um, into this piece.
This is a great story that we get to look at in week 4. Fill my days with meaning, and we might also say with fish. Luke's story stitches together two traditions of memory: the call of the fishermen that occurs at the beginning of Mark's gospel, and the miraculous catch of fish, which you find at the end of John's gospel. Unfortunately, Jesus' encounter with fishermen at their work is typically romanticized, euphemized, trivialized in our churches. It's actually a powerful scenario that communicates defiance and delight, resistance and renewal as this first demonstration project of Sabbath economics. And it's almost identical in theme to the wedding at Cana. In the teeth of imperial scarcity and privatization, Jesus reveals the surprise of abundance for everybody. Now, scholars have drawn a compelling portrait of how, in the real world of first century Palestine, the prominent Galilean fishing industry was undergoing extractive colonization by the elites. It's a long story, and you can read about it in the book, but a formerly sustainable local economy was basically being structurally adjusted for export to benefit the rich, in case that sounds familiar.
Thank you for saying that.
And peasant fishermen were falling to the bottom of the social pyramid. So that's where Jesus begins organizing. As John Crossan put it, it was precisely and specifically by the shores of the Sea of Galilee that the radicality of Israel's God confronted the normalcy of Rome's civilization under Herod Antipas, second decade of the first century of the Common Era. If Jesus can be that specific, hopefully we can be that specific as we proclaim these texts right now. Jesus' strategy was not unlike Gandhi's mobilization of the lowest Harijan classes in India in his 1930 Salt March to the Sea, or Martin Luther King's fateful decision to stand with the Memphis low-wage sanitation workers strike in 1968. True social change only comes from below. So Luke depicts Jesus organizing a teach-in among these disgruntled workers. I love this, again, theatric. He borrows a boat from a certain Simon, pushes just offshore so he can use the water and the beach as a natural amphitheater. Where did he learn this stuff? He concludes his analysis of their plight with an object lesson, instructing Simon to shove off into deeper water, cast his nets one more time. The boatman's response is poignant. But we worked all through the night and we caught nothing, he laments bitterly. Local waters were becoming fished out, depleted by extractive colonization, like diamond mines in Africa, rainforest logging in Latin America, tar sands in Canada. The mystical yet very material moment of this great catch symbolizes the abundance of creation restored. It's a glimpse of how their waters used to be before the artificial scarcity wrought by empire. Ironically, it also portends a double disaster for Simon, potential loss of his boat and his nets. And yet, if this overwhelming catch tears their nets, it also smashes their cycle of poverty. As in Luke's story, later story, and much more well-known story of the multitudes sharing bread and fish in the wilderness, this prophetic sign is a reminder that creation rightly shared can sustain everyone, starting with the peasants.
Hmm.
So should these hard-pressed peasant fishermen joyfully gather in this illegal windfall? Or shall they run for the hills from the regulators who might prosecute them for an unauthorized catch?
Mhm.
This understands their anxiety and compassionately invites them to let go of their fear. A good
Mm.
word for our own moment. And then he offers them something even more powerful than a bumper harvest, a paradigm shift toward a radically alternative vocation. I've got a better idea, he says. How about you come on with me and let's go catch some big fish? This fishing for people is one of the most famous lines in gospel literature. Evangelicals have traditionally interpreted it to mean that Jesus was calling them to save souls.
Yeah.
In fact, Jesus is alluding to no less than 4 prophetic oracles about justice, which use the metaphor of a fishing expedition. Jeremiah 16, Amos 4, Ezekiel 29, Habakkuk 1. Jesus, who both knew the prophetic literature and sought to embody it anew in his context. For him, fishers of people was a Sabbath economics call to join him in overturning structures of power and privilege in the world to restore both creation and equity. And having little to lose, those fishermen joined the movement. What a beautiful story.
Oh. And what a beautiful story as you tell it. And preachers, I hope you replay what you just heard Ched said again, and maybe again. This opening, this recontextualizing of scripture, I mean, just, Ched, I was in our introduction earlier, I was saying how I'd looked on your website and there were some quotes there by people who were just like, why have I never heard this gospel this way? And your whole idea of the animation, the theological animation. We're used to hearing theological imagination, but this theological animation, what a gift it is for us to animate these stories in a way that calls us afresh to these teachings of Jesus. Thank you so much.
Just briefly, like of all of the weeks where I was digging into your book to try and sort of respond to the scripture passage, this one was the easiest to almost immediately, to use your words, Ted, recontextualize, because the context was so brilliantly put in front of me. It immediately made me think of my hometown, which was devastated by NAFTA. As you talk about fishermen, it reminds me that one of the most common forms of slavery across the globe is the fishing industry. There's nothing new under the sun.